breaking it down in layman's terms. Today I want to talk about upselling, cross-selling, working with your existing accounts. Got a special guest. He's back, Victor Antonio. What it do, Vic?
It do everything, Doug. I'm happy to be back on the show, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm happy to have you back. This has been a long time. Mastering the Upsell came out beginning of the year. Finally did a video book review on Amazon. Check it out. Love the book, Victor. You've written, I don't know, but 15 books, maybe 20. I don't know. You're working on a lot of things, but is this what, number 14?
Right on the money, man. That's number 14. I'm super happy about this book. I know we're going to get into it. And I'll just say that the reason I'm happy for it because it's a very tactical book, like really practical information to help you sell more.
It's very tactical. And what I love about it is you're a data guy. You're an analytical guy, an engineer at heart, or been an engineer. You really speak to the data, but you got a great sense of story selling throughout the book. You've B2C or B2C experiences throughout the book. So it's a great read. Speaking of the book, let's just talk about it cover to cover. First thing I want to talk about, the cover. Okay. Yep. I'm going to take a pass at this. This is a little bit different. It's
all right.
As your typical book, the Wiley book, the HarperCollins author book styles, going through a publisher. You kind of put some artistic liberties on this book, a lot of creativity. I just want to take a shot at it. You've got to get the book if you haven't gotten it, but you've got the title, Mastering the Upsell.
Can I just give you a little backdrop before you get into trying to figure out the iconography in there? So we were going to go with the standard. As you say, we were going to go with the standard block letters, solid color, what everybody does, right? And literally, I had that set up. And my daughter, Camille, who does all of my marketing, she's a very creative person, and she has a very, very interesting perspective because she does a lot of artwork. And so we started talking about, maybe coming up with something that's kind of Dali-esque, like Salvador Dali, something that has all these abstract images that really mean something. And so she went off and she did it, cover to cover. And this is really her baby, her creation. So I thought, I said, it looks weird enough. Let's go with it.
Oh, I love what Camille put into it. Now, I mean, it's definitely different than your typical book cover. And there's a lot of artistic, creative concepts in here. The title, Mastering the Upsell, you've got 3 I's here. There's got to be something for the 3s, but the first I, and we'll have a picture up for our viewers, below, at, and above. It has something to do with eye level, buy level, I'm guessing, and I'll let you respond. Then you've got retain, gain, activate, and grow. That's just 4 ways to grow your business, but there's an I with that. And last is customer acquisition costs, keeping those costs down or cost high when you get new clients. That's pretty well laid out for you to play it out. Diamonds, acres of diamonds, we'll get into that. Technology in the background, some server boxes, AI, proximity to buy or propensity to buy. I think you're tying in that. 3 options, the popcorn, 3 options is a strategy for upselling. The shark in the water, haven't figured that one out yet. And on the front side of the cover, break it down for me, Vic.
So on the 3 eyeballs at the top are just different perspectives on those items, right? So, hey, we're going to give you some new perspectives on, for example, below, at, and above pricing. And so it's just the way you do pricing structure. The retain, gain, grow, and reactivate, 4 different ways to grow your business, a new perspective, a new model. And then the total acquisition cost is how do you lower acquisition costs. And again, all this, the eyeballs represent just a new perspective that customers have. Now, the diamonds, as you pointed out, is acres of diamonds. The short version of that story is that there's acres of diamonds all around us, and sometimes which represent customers, and we're not even aware of all the opportunities we can kind of mine if we knew what we were looking for. And you're dead on with the servers, right? The data. How do you use analytics for propensity to buy? And that was kind of a little offshoot of my previous book, which was Sales Ex Machina, how AI is changing the world of selling. The popcorn is the National Geographic study on how to use that one right there. I mean, that one right there is going to make you money if you know how to use that strategy with popcorn. The fins is Shark Tank. Damon John, I think he's in there. If you'll see, there's a little car in there. So you see a car? That's a Volvo. That's actually my Volvo. It's really small. It's right below the camel in the eyeball.
I see it with the camel and stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
so the camel is part of the Acres of Diamonds story. And then the car, the Volvo, is when I tell a story about upselling my Volvo dealer and how he does it with me. So that's pretty much the broad brush of what's on there. So it's like you really got to dig for some of that stuff.
Oh, I love it. And Camille did a great job, and you got good penmanship on your signature. Now, the matter at hand, the back side of the cover. Boom, there it is. I see a picture of you. I see a lot of international flavor. I see a speaker on stage and an airplane. So you're a well-traveled keynote speaker. I don't know what else to say. I'm missing something here as I gloss
Yeah.
over it on this gloss
I
copy.
believe if you see to the left, there's a pickaxe, right? That's kind of a tie-in to the Acres of Diamond. The airplane, I think, is Southwest Airlines or airline tickets. Then you see a pool. Do you see the ladder with the pool?
Absolutely.
And remember that's why I talk about customer fatigue and how you go back after a certain period of time to actually upsell them more. And I forgot what the bread guy stands for. He's got a bread. He's got an oar. He's a sailor. I forgot what that stands for. I have to ask my daughter on that one.
No, there's so much thought involved in the cover.
Yeah, we just wanted, Doug. We just wanted to be creative, and I think I was in that mode where I was like, how everybody's doing it a certain way. It's always the block letters, and I said, you know what? Let's do something different. I think the next book will probably have the same feel. We'll just kind of begin to use this as our motif going forward for book covers, as our differentiator in the market to stand out.
Well, just to play off on that real quickly, because we belabor the artistic creation in you. I mean, you do painting. You've done artwork. Camille's obviously got that flavor for it. It adds a nice personal touch. And looking at that now, I don't think I even have to read the book, do I? No, but the context of the book, and we're going to get into that finally. But great job on the cover. When you talk about mastering the upsell, okay, the content in the book, there are tons of sales books out there. There's tons of books that I can't get enough mindset, enough how to sell authentic, how to have prospecting or inbound marketing. There's so many books, more and more. You really tackled an area about mastering the upsell, growing new business with existing clients. What DNA, what was inside of you that made you want to write this book?
Well, it's kind of one of those serendipitous type of moments where you're thinking about something, and I said, yeah, and I was thinking about upselling, and you know how you come up with 2 or 3 different strategies. Like, I think somebody had asked me about upselling. I said, well, here's one way of doing it. Here's 2 ways of doing it, and that got me thinking about, well, I know more ways, and I started counting the ways you can upsell, and then I started researching, and I found a few more ways. But then I realized, I said, are there any books out there on upselling? And I think I found one that was written like in the 80s or something, or maybe 90s. It was a long time ago. And so that's when I said, you know what, let me see how many strategies I can come up with to upsell to your existing customer. And what's interesting is that this book was written, I think, really prior to the pandemic. I just held on to it for a while. But it's so appropriate for now, because what it really highlights is that you can sell up to 30% more if you just focus on your existing customers. And so when I took those 2 concepts, different strategies for upselling, nobody else is talking about it, and the fact that now customer acquisition costs are high, it costs too much money to get a new client, or it's too difficult, why don't we focus on selling to existing customers? And that's really what generated I'll just say, the momentum to get this book published finally.
Well, you say finally and published. I mean, you've had the book concept for a while now, but you released it beginning of this year, December, January. You've had it out there for a while. Was there any reason why you held back releasing it?
I wanted to use the book. It's a good question because I have no good answer for it. The best answer I have is that when the pandemic hit, I didn't want to release a book during the pandemic because I wanted to use this book to actually do events.
Sure.
I also, believe it or not, Doug, is when I write things, I don't think I'm the best writer in the world. I really don't. But I think I'm good at, as you pointed out, story selling. In other words, telling good stories. And I got part of me was like, I don't know, is this book good enough? Everybody goes through that, right? And people say, well, this is your 14th book, Victor. I think you would have gotten over that syndrome already. But no, you always write something, you go, is it good enough? And I think I mentioned to you when we were talking about setting up this interview is that I got some affirmation from Jeb Blunt, who read it and loved the book. I was like, oh, good. Jeb loves it because, Jeb's, the way he writes, guys like him and Anthony and Arino, the way they write is just masterful. So, when Jeb told me he really loved the way the book was laid out, it's very simple, very to the point. I was like, good. It's one of those things. You're always afraid to put your baby out there because people are going to criticize your baby, in this case, the book. So I think part of it was I was holding on to it just because I was a little afraid to launch it.
Well, you mentioned Jeb, you mentioned Anthony, and those guys are putting out books like crazy, especially Jeb. Yeah. He's a book writing machine, as well as you are in a sense. So within the book, we talked about, Jeb and Anthony, great sales leaders, great writers as well. The book really gets into, obviously, the heart and soul of the book is mastering the upsell, working with your existing clients, but you can actually upsell a new client, which I want to get into. But I love the start of the book because you look at the sales process. We got a different book cover on it right now. So you're standing out there. Then you break down the outbound process, some of the strengths and weaknesses with outbound prospecting, lead generation, the time, the customer acquisition time for getting new customers on board. Of course, there's inbound selling you get into, but you get those warm leads coming in inbound, but how qualified are they? What about the control issues? But then you position the book to why upselling and cross-selling, for this matter, is key. And I think that's where the book really, you're validating it, not saying the inbound or outbound are wrong. It's just, here's another factor of 4 ways to grow business. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, I called upselling the third option, right? Because you got inbound, wait for the leads to come in, or you go outbound, try to find some new business. But the third option is that maybe you can just call outbound your existing clients. And that's really wanted to focus in on. And when I talk about 4 ways to grow your business, right, there's gain new clients, go out and get existing clients. That's one way of doing it. But the cost of acquisition is getting that much higher. In other words, it costs a lot of money just to get somebody into your pipeline, into your funnel. Now, number 2 was that you can, again, you can retain existing customers. Okay, well, that's about driving customer loyalty. So I said, okay, great. And then the third option was you can reactivate old deals, like things that just went silent or just were stalled. But then the fourth option is you can grow your existing customer base. And I asked myself, and I framed it that way because you can grow, get new ones, retain what you got, great. You can reactivate maybe some old ones, but what about this last quadrant over here called grow your existing customer base? What if we can go back and do that? And there's a study I highlight in the book that talks about if you just focused on that, growing existing customer base, 2 things will happen. Again, as I mentioned, you can grow your sales by up to 30%, which is amazing already. But your client acquisition cost is really nothing because you've already acquired the clients. So again, opportunity to sell more, no cost, high profitability. Why not do it? And I'll summarize with this. When I ask companies today, what's your upselling strategy, or how do you do upselling or approach upselling? I'm telling you, I hear crickets because nobody ever really thinks about it.
You kind of proved all that point home throughout the book, and we'll get into the process and why maybe it's been ignored or not being utilized, obviously, and the premise for the book. Now, you talk about customer acquisition costs, keeping those down, or working with your existing accounts, or client lifetime value. You don't talk about the formulas. You give us formulas. You're a data guy. You're an analytical guy. You're a proof of concept guy. If you read the book, you'll have an understanding of formulas and metrics and everything throughout the book, along with Victor's awesome story selling content. And that's another interview, keeping those costs down, and that's why upselling is so critical today to grow revenue.
Yeah, I for those who don't know, I have an electrical engineering background, so I've always loved the technical side. I think I'm more convinced when I see formulas and how you can calculate certain value. So when you look at client acquisition costs, customer lifetime value, share of wallet, in other words, how much are we actually selling, penetration rates, things like that really interest me because that's data. That's not emotional. That's data. That's fact. And in the book, for example, I was blown away, Doug, by the customer lifetime value of a Starbucks customer. And they measure it over 20 years, Doug. Because I asked people, I said, well, you're calculating your customer lifetime value. And the definition of that is if somebody starts buying from you today, how long do they stay with you? And over that period of time, how much do they buy from you? That's customer lifetime value. And what's fascinating is that Starbucks has a 20-year window, which is amazing because I thought it was going to be like maybe 7. And then now I ask companies, how do you calculate your customer lifetime value? And I also, again, I get some blank looks like, what do you mean, Victor? And I have to explain it to them. And then and they go, well, I think it's this. I said, well, over how many years? What's your window? And I still get a blank look. Now, this is interesting, Doug, because if you don't know how to calculate your customer lifetime value, that means how do you know your marketing's working? So in other words, if I spend $1,000 on marketing, I need to know what that $1,000 is going to buy me once I acquire a client. And hopefully it's going to be more than the $1,000, right? That's typically the goal. I'll spend $1,000, but I'll acquire a client that over 3, 5, 10, 20 years is going to buy X amount of money, which means, I'll definitely invest $1,000 if I can get, let's say, $20,000 over 3 years. And a lot of companies don't talk like that. They don't have these numbers readily available.
Oh, I love it. And throughout the book, you you document case studies and your own personal experiences, whether it's B2C or B2B sales examples, and documenting that. You talked about a little bit about technology, so we went back to the cover. Propensity to buy. You're in, AI in sales. You wrote your book before that. Let's talk a little bit about propensity to buy. You had to put that in there before we even talk about how to upsell. You had to go back to, and I love this because you had to talk about what's the future like, predictive analytics, modeling.
Correct.
Speak on that chapter a little bit. I know you got to get the book out there, people, but yeah, talk to me.
No, I'm glad. I mean, by the way, thank you for asking that great question. So propensity to buy is, obviously your willingness to buy something, but let's give everybody a contextual example. And this was in my previous book, the Sales Ex Machina book, where I talked about, for example, Amazon's a perfect example of a company who knows how to use predictive analytics, predicting what you want to buy. We've all been on Amazon's website. We've all bought something, and they say something like this: people who bought this also bought that, right? And so they know that people who bought this also bought these things. And what they do is by simply showing you what other people are buying along with this, that's it. Your propensity to buy actually increases. And so they have that data. They also have the data of what you search for on Amazon. So they're also curating that information, what they're showing you, so you can actually buy more. There's something called the mere exposure effect. The mere exposure effect is like once you see it, it's like you can't unsee it. And they understand that. And so when people who bought this also bought this, that's mere exposure. And just that mere exposure gets people to buy a little more.
It's leveraging the data for future purchases and being able to have a strategic answer. You got the data, utilize it. I love that chapter, because I look at the first section of the book as really validating where we are. And then the second part of the book, really part two, would be really how do you upsell? How do you cross-sell? And one of the other chapters really spoke on upsell tone, which really intrigued me, where you talked about you got to have empathy. You got to come from a voice or an understanding of authority to be a subject matter expert. And then you got to push back a little bit, not push back, but what's the D word? You got to detach yourself from the customer, because if you got all this knowledge and you're showing, you got to let them kind of have that nudge to make the decision. Is that what you're going with when it comes to upsell tone? Put that in layman's terms for me a little bit.
Well, first of all, thank you for highlighting something. There's two parts of the book. The first part really is the context of why upselling is important, right? So we talk about the third option, upselling, acres of diamonds, opportunities all around you, customer lifetime value, so forth and so on. And then the second part of the book is just pure strategy. And so when we talk about customers buying and we talk about empathy and detaching, and sometimes we attach ourselves too much to a customer. There's something interesting. Empathy up to a point is something that nobody really talks about. Everybody says you got to empathize with your customer. Well, up to a point, because then you got to detach yourself, and now you have to be that domain expert, that subject matter expert that says, look, I'm trying to help you out here. And you detach yourself, and now you're giving them that authoritative advice. But this is after you've listened to them. I hear what you're saying. I got it. I understand. I heard everything you said about what you need, but here's what you're not looking at. Boom, detachment right away. Have you considered this? Have you thought about this? Based on what you told me, you might want to look at something like this. And that's part of the attachment/detachment. Man, you caught that subtlety, Doug. That was pretty good, actually.
No, and I like that, because you've always been about positioning in your books and in conversations that we've had, how to leverage the conversation, that nudge, that influence, but letting the customer arrive at their own decision without pushing it on them. And that little diagram in the book with empathy, authority, and detach kind of stood out to me. I mean, a lot of it. And then again, the second part of the book, we can go into every strategy. We don't have time for that. Get the book. But there's a few ones I want to highlight on, and one that really I enjoy, and you just commented on it, was phrases and why statements. Being able to, when you're presenting to a client or a customer, being able to have those phrases, the mind shift of upselling, but tie it down with a validation of a why statement. Yeah. I love that chapter. That's worth its price in gold.
Yeah,
and that's
interesting. By the way, I'm loving this conversation, because you're giving me, you know how you write something and I have my favorite ones in there. And so now I'm hearing your favorite ones or things that stood out for you. And I think that's pretty cool. But on this chapter in particular, this is really a good chapter, because I talk about, you just can't tell somebody, hey, here, you should get this. You got to give a good reason why. And so I give you phrases that you could use. For example, I'll say, hey, Doug, early on, you mentioned that you were going to use this computer to do fill in the blank. What I'm going to recommend is that you also consider this. Here's why, or because is another way of putting it. And as soon as you add that here's why or because, all of a sudden you're reinforcing that value. But notice that the first part was like you mentioned that you were going to use it for this and that you might be needing this, so forth. Now I detach, and from my authoritative standpoint, well, here's something you might want to consider. Blah, 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 fill in the blank, and here's why. And that here's why is where the real sales value comes in, because if that why is big, the customer's going to say, you know what, you're right. I need to do that. If it has no value, then obviously they're not going to buy. So I'm glad you highlighted that.
Right, and you even go to the fact that if you give them a here's why and it has no value, you can turn them the other way too. You could stall the sale or no opportunity. You've got so many examples in that chapter. That's one of my favorite chapters. And along with, positioning products and services, having that third option, freemium, the premium. I mean, the list goes on and on. I think there's 16 of them, and you keep adding and you keep adding with that. In fact, you've taken this book and you actually did a workshop at the Outbound Sales Conference back in June of 2021, right? We're in 2022. And the content builds itself.
It's funny because I did that. It was 2021. And so we did that. And that was the first time I actually did Mastering the Upsell, because the book wasn't released yet, I think. It wasn't. And so I just said, let me test the content out. And it was the last day of a 3-day Outbound conference event. By the way, you should go to this year's Outbound conference, go to outboundconference.com. And that was on the last day. It was the last workshop of the day. And I'm thinking, man, these folks are going to be tired. They've just been through Outbound. They've been through all these workshops. And I'm telling you, Doug, it was like full attention, 100% people were in. And I think because the content was so unique and different that people had not seen it before. And so I gave them like 9 different strategies they can use. I picked the top 9 that can fit in an hour and a half. And I think it was a hit, man. I think people really enjoyed that session because nobody really talks about upselling. If I ask you right now, who's really talking about upselling, you'd be pressed to find a good answer or a good person doing it right now besides me.
A couple things I want to unpack there. What I love about that is you actually tested the waters of your book prior to releasing the book. So you did that in June. Fast forward, you released the book first of the year. But then in the first of the year, you're a video guy. You put a lot of content out there, Sales After Dark, but you started doing special video series on this book as well. I mean, did you learn from that experience going live? Because it's not one thing to write about it, but you're actually doing this experientially through selling and presenting.
I think what always comes back that's fascinating, when somebody says, I usually get one of 3 answers. Yeah, I do that already. Okay, that's one. Number 2, I didn't know that. I think I'll start doing that, which is always a good answer. And then the third one is kind of my favorite, actually, is like, Victor, I do something like that, but now that I heard you say that, I think I'm going to adjust what I do just a little bit. So whether you're not using it, you can put a twist on it. These are 3 ways that you can apply this. That's usually the feedback I get back at. That makes me happy when people go, if they know it, then I just confirmed what you already do. Right. So I say, good for you. You're doing it right. If you're not doing, I remind you of what you should be doing. And then sometimes people just say, you know what? I think I need to tweak it just a little bit. Like even when we just talked about the phraseology, adding the why, giving a good value why at the end. He goes, I never add that part at the end. I think I'll just add that from now on. So when you get feedback like that, which is what I typically get, emails or when I do the lives, that makes me feel good because I feel like I'm delivering real new content and not just some rehashed content that's already been out there for quite a while.
Okay, speaking on feedback, let's lean into that a little bit. You've written a book. You've done the presentation. It's printed. It's cover to cover. It's done. Is there anything that you wish you would have put in the book that you didn't put in the book from after it's been published?
Great question. The answer is no. I don't think so. There's nothing. I think I haven't come up. You know how when you write the book, you say, hey, I forgot this strategy. I haven't come up with one yet that's worth putting in there. But I think in a couple of years, there'll probably be another revision of the book to add more upselling strategies. So the short answer is no, actually. I'm pretty happy with what is in there because I think it's enough content where you're not overwhelmed. And I think it's that balance. There's, you don't want too little content where it has no value, but you want so much so people just get overwhelmed. They don't know how to apply a lot of things. So I'm really happy with it. But more importantly, as you point out, the second half of the book is all tactics. So you can really go in there and pick your tactic and almost use it like a workbook, or a field guide. And so I'm really happy with the reception of the book. On this book also, inside, if you notice, we tried to use more graphics. And I'm going to start incorporating more graphics in my future book because I really think it helps the storylines go better.
Oh, I love the pictures, visual elements. Maybe have Camille do a little bit more creative flair to it. Don't get me wrong, I love the formulas and charts. I know you're going to have them in there, but it's documentation of what you're trying to get across, some validity. Now, Victor, I'm going to put on the writer's hat here. Let's say I'm writing a book in layman's terms, and I'm going to hire you as a ghostwriter. We've talked about content in the book. Now, I'm a big proponent of leveraging video to sell. There's a lot of content out there for video selling. Off the top of your head, what types of videos would you think we could use for upselling?
What videos you could use for upselling?
In other words, I'm writing a chapter in my book on leveraging video for upselling.
Right. How would you use video to do upselling? So let's say, are we doing this virtually or do I get to see the person face to face?
Either case.
Okay. So let's just say that it's virtual. Let's just say that's virtual, right? I think, again, I would begin with the mere exposure. But I want to highlight something here because I skipped over this. Upselling does not begin at the end of the sale. Like when you make the sale, then you begin upselling. It's not how it works. That's a misperception. Upselling begins early on in the discussion as you're trying to close. For example, I like to use a computer because everybody gets it, right? But let's say that you're going to buy a computer. You're going to buy a computer. Let's go with Apple, right? You're coming to the Apple store. You're going to buy a computer. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about what you're going to use the computer for, right? And so you're going to tell me all these wonderful things. Now, I also know what pretty much your minimum viable purchase will be. By that, I mean, you look and say, look, Victor, if I can just get, 1 terabytes in terms of memory, I can get blah, 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 blah speed on the processor. I want a light, a laptop. I need a 13-inch screen, so forth and so on. That's all I need. Boom. I can highlight that. Now I'm still asking you what you're going to use it for. And I said, okay, well, if those are the specifications at a minimum, this is the one I would recommend. So I would start out with 3 and then just zoom in on the one you want. And then I get you to say, yeah, okay, well, let's go with that one. And then I would say something like this. And then we'll tie it to video. I would say something like this. Doug, before we close this out, I said, you also mentioned that you're doing heavy video editing, right? And blah, 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 blah. And you go, yes, I am. I said, let me recommend something for you that I think will help you speed up and then I can just say, use an external drive, whatever it may be. And then I said, this is something I would add to you because it's going to speed up your processing and your workflow. Or I can say, are you using an external monitor? You say, no. I said, well, if you're doing you told me you're doing documentaries. When you're doing documentaries, you can't work off a 30-inch screen. You want to go with the 15-inch screen. So I suggest for another $300 because you're going to have this for 3 years, which is about $100 a year more. Why not go with a bigger screen? In other words, I've closed already on the actual computer, but I'm now trying to upsell them on different features. But this was all set up early on. Through great questioning, I knew what he was trying to do or she was trying to do. So I know what I want to sell them, because if I try to sell them everything, they'll just, they'll fold because it's too much sometimes. You get overwhelmed. We talk about that, decision fatigue. So if I can just get them to close on the laptop, the basic, and then upsell them on additional features. But again, I want to highlight that these are things that I found out during discovery, and I'm seeding throughout the conversation. Yeah, if you're going to work in front of a computer, a big screen is always the best, right? And you just start saying things like this. Yeah, absolutely. If you're editing movies, you definitely want to use like an external drive if you run out of memory on your computer. Now, when I get to the end, fast forward, I get to the end, I've closed on the laptop. Then I can say, hey, by the way, you remember early on we talked about this, the bigger screen and number of hours? This will be an opportunity for you to upgrade to a bigger screen. Here's what's going to cost you, so forth and so on. Now, let's go back to your question so I can answer that specifically. So if I've sold you something, Doug, a computer, for example, now I know that I've already had these discussions with you on ancillary items. I've already had that discussion with you, right? So now I'm going to send you a video that could probably reinforce this. Hey, Doug, hope you're enjoying the video. I wanted to highlight a couple of things you mentioned, and I try to be as quick as possible getting to the point. Hope the documentaries are going well. I want to highlight, we just got this product in. I want you to look at this product, da 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 da. Here's why. That's how I guess I would use video for upselling. But I noticed that a lot of companies, by simply just sending me an email because they know what I have in terms of products that I've already bought, they already send me emails, and immediately these emails have a little video of somebody demoing something. And let me be specific, because I'm being kind of very vague here, is that, Doug, you know that I like making pens, right? That's my hobby. I make pens, right? And so I get a lot. Woodcraft is one company. Penn State is another company. They always send me these newsletters. And in there says, hey, here's a new technique for making a pen that'll make your process that much faster. And I see it, it's like 3 minutes. I'm like, okay, I'll watch that. I click on that, and sure enough, they're using some new tools, right? And that's how they're using video to kind of hook me to go look at the website to see how much this new tool costs. And I think that's another way of doing it. So there's several ways you can apply this. So that's my long answer to your short question.
No, but I appreciate the answer to the question. But I also appreciate you defining the process of upselling and cross-selling with accounts. It doesn't necessarily have to be an existing customer. Even though the title of the book, Mastering the Upsell, Strategies for Increasing Revenue with Existing Customers, upselling can take place the minute discovery takes place.
Correct. It'd be, like I said, the seeding process. Maybe I should have put that in the book. When you say, what did I put in? Maybe I should have put that in. That you should seed the upsell opportunities, what they might want to consider. So if you're building you're building a pool, you're thinking, I just need a hole in the ground, the materials that make it, a ladder, and a diving board. That's it. But then I started talking about, well, where are you going to sit? Where do you want to relax? Things of that nature. I start introducing things that get you start thinking about ancillary things, but I still focus on just selling you the pool. And by mentioning these things now, later on, when I come back, when I circle back to you, it's not going to be a surprise that I'm mentioning it for the first time.
Right.
I think that's the other thing. It's familiarity with the upsell.
And being able to detach and not oversell the upsell.
Yeah.
And you do that quite well with documentation throughout the book. And there's a lot of different strategies throughout the book that we didn't obviously cover here. You've got to get the book, read it cover to cover. You'll definitely enjoy what you're reading. Well, Victor, I shared a few of my favorite chapters or concepts from the book. What are yours?
My favorite one, my favorite one, if you wake me out of a dead sleep, says, what's your favorite? And it's a tough one. It's the decoy pricing. Decoy pricing is just clever. This is the one that I use the example or the study from National Geographic with the popcorn test. And that right there, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, listen carefully. Get the book. If you learn how to use decoy pricing, you will increase your average deal size. You will shift the buyer's perspective on pricing. And how you use decoys and how I highlight them in the book is really one of the most powerful strategies in the book, if not the most powerful strategies, to increasing your average deal size, as you say, by just simply nudging the customer with decoy pricing.
No, I love that chapter as well. As all the chapters were succinct and well written. You positioned the first part of the book about why upselling, then you showed how to do it. The sales process we talked about in the beginning of the book, the inbound, the outbound, and the third option. Again, the drawback is, why aren't companies incorporating an upselling sales strategy in their process? Due to effort, time, laziness, unawareness? What's the problem, man?
Doug, that is it's a great question, Doug. I don't have an answer for it. I'm just like, this is like the layup, right? This is like, nobody's on the court. I'm just laying up. The goalie's not even there. All I got to do is hit the puck in the net. And I'm thinking, why are they teaching upselling? This is like the strategy to use. And again, without fail, Doug, without fail, no qualifiers, I ask companies, what's your upselling process? How do you do it? How do you train with it? Nothing. Nobody has anything for me. And I usually get this, well, they know how to upsell. I said, but do you have a process for it? No, but they know how to do it. That's the most I ever get. It's
secondhand, like, okay, yeah, whatever. They're taking it for granted. And that's what kind of hit me real hard in the book. So, I read the first part and, the acres of diamonds, and you validate. But I'm like, why aren't we doing this? Read the book. Sales companies, get a copy of this book. Send it to your staff, your sales force out there. Hey,
Like, and by the way, I want to highlight that in the book, my second favorite, if I can just go there,
sure,
is I talk about value mapping, mapping the upsell. And that is much like Amazon uses people who've bought this also bought this. Companies can create these value upselling maps. So people who bought this also bought these three things. What does that do? That gives the salesperson an idea of what they can sell next. Because a salesperson will close on something, but then they go, okay, what else can I sell them? Well, based on the data that you could probably pull from your CRM or whatever system you're using, you can say, look, people who bought this have a high propensity to buy these three things. That means that if I know that the propensity is very high in that connection, that means my close rates are going to go up because I know specifically what to sell next. Now, and that's only first level upsell. Now, after you've done the first upsell, there's a second order upsell that you can do. People who bought that, when they bought that, will now probably buy this. So they bought item A, which is the original sale. B was the upsell. Now, if they bought B, that means A, B, they're going to buy C. So now focus on selling them on C. And so what you're doing is you're streamlining the thought process for the salesperson. No guessing. They know specifically what they need to upsell and what they need to focus in on. Now imagine pulling from your CRM, whatever platform you decide to use, pulling from your CRM what customers have bought, categorizing them, and then focusing on those specific upsells by category. Efficiency through the roof. Average deal size through the roof, plus close rates go up as well.
You talked a little bit about that, obviously, in the laddering process, too. I think just different levels of upselling, having a roadmap. Again, you got to have the map to go on the road in this case. And teams aren't doing that. So that's where I walked away reading this book thinking, wow, okay, why aren't organizations doing this? And that's why Mastering the Upsell, in layman's terms, video review on Amazon, selfless, shameless promotion, is why you need to get a copy of this book. Last but not least, anything else that you want to add, Vic?
Nothing more than that. Read the book. I think it'll be beneficial. I know it'll be beneficial. Use the strategies. I also give you some scripts and phrases to use in some of the chapters. So, you know, how to do it, why to do it. And yeah, check out the book. It's a great book, and happy selling, man. Sell more to your existing customers. I mean, I want us to leave them with this one, and I'm repeating this for the third time. If you focus on selling to your existing customers, you can increase your sales by up to 30% and add no client acquisition costs. Why not do it?
And there it is, Victor Antonio's latest book, Mastering the Upsell. Check out Victor's work on YouTube. Check out his workshops, his training programs, and he's probably working on 4 other books as we speak. Victor, thank you so much for coming on in layman's terms.
Thank you, Doug, for having me. Appreciate being here, man.